I almost didn't go to Jake's wedding. That's the truth, and I'm not proud of it. Work had been brutal that month. I'd been living on coffee and half-finished spreadsheets, and the thought of putting on a suit and making small talk with people I hadn't seen in a decade sounded like torture. But Jake had been my roommate freshman year of college, the guy who drove me to the ER at 2 a.m. when I broke my wrist skateboarding, and you don't skip that guy's wedding because you're tired. So I drove the 3 hours back to my hometown, checked into a cheap motel off the highway, and told myself I'd stay for the ceremony, shake some hands, eat some cake, and leave before the dancing got embarrassing. I did not expect to see her. I hadn't thought about Maya Chen in years. Okay, that's a lie too. I thought about her sometimes, the way you think about a song you used to love, a little wistfully, a little embarrassed at how much it used to mean to you. We'd gone to high school together. She sat 2 seats behind me in AP Biology junior year, and I spent an entire semester dissecting frogs while secretly rehearsing what I'd say if I ever worked up the nerve to ask her to homecoming. I never did work up the nerve. She went with someone else. I went with my chemistry lab partner, and we spent most of the night talking about our college applications instead of dancing. Maya and I stayed friendly enough. We said hi in the hallways. We were in the same group chat for a while after graduation, but the friendship faded the way high school friendships do, dissolving quietly under the weight of separate colleges, separate cities, separate lives. I hadn't seen her in 12 years. And then there she was, standing near the guest book table at the entrance to the reception hall, wearing a soft green dress, laughing at something the wedding coordinator had said. My stomach did something complicated and stupid, something I thought I'd outgrown at 17. I told myself I could just walk past. Say a polite hello if our eyes met, keep moving, find my assigned table, and spend the evening pretending my heart wasn't doing an idiotic drumroll against my ribs. That plan lasted about 4 seconds. She turned, and her eyes found mine, and her whole face changed, surprise first, then something warmer, something that looked almost like relief. "No way," she said, walking toward me. "Is that actually you?" "Depends who's asking," I said, and immediately regretted it, because it was such a stupid thing to say, but she laughed anyway, and the sound of it landed somewhere deep in my chest, exactly the way it used to. "You look the same," she said. "A little more gray, maybe." "Wisdom," I said. "Or exhaustion. I forget which." She looked good. Better than good. There was a steadiness to her now that hadn't been there in high school, a kind of quiet confidence that made her seem taller than she actually was. Her hair was cut short, just past her chin, nothing like the ponytail she used to wear when we were kids. She wasn't the girl from AP Biology anymore. She was someone new, someone I didn't know yet, and for reasons I couldn't fully explain, I wanted to. "How do you know Jake?" I asked, because it was easier to ask questions than to sit with how strange it felt to be standing this close to her again. "His fiancée, his wife, now, I guess, Priya. We were roommates in grad school." "You?" "College. He was my roommate freshman year. Drove me to the hospital once when I broke my wrist trying to skateboard down a parking garage ramp." "That sounds like a story." "It's not a good one. I don't come out looking smart." "Those are usually the best stories," she said, and there was something in the way she said it, light, teasing, but with an edge of real curiosity that made me feel, for just a second, like no time had passed at all. We ended up seated at the same table for dinner. I don't know if that was an accident or if Jake, in some small act of mischief-making, had arranged it on purpose. Knowing him, it was probably the second one. He always did have a habit of pushing people together and then standing back to watch what happened. Dinner passed easily. We caught each other up on the big, obvious things. She'd become an architect, spent 4 years in Chicago before moving back to be closer to her parents. I'd bounced between 2 cities for work, landed somewhere I liked well enough, though like was doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. She wasn't married. Neither was I. We didn't say much about why, and I didn't ask, and she didn't either, and there was a comfortable kind of restraint to it, like we both understood that some questions were better saved for later, if there was going to be a later at all. By the time the band started playing and people began drifting toward the dance floor, something had shifted between us. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a single moment I could point to and say, "That's when it changed." It was more like the years had quietly folded up and put themselves away, and what was left underneath was something that had never actually gone anywhere. It had just been waiting. "Do you want to get some air?" she asked, after the third slow song in a row made the dance floor feel a little too loaded with meaning neither of us was ready to name. "It's a lot in there." "Yeah," I said. "Let's go." We walked out to the courtyard behind the reception hall, where strings of lights had been hung between the trees and the noise of the party faded into something soft and distant. The night air was cool. She hugged her arms around herself, and without really thinking about it, I took off my jacket and put it over her shoulders. She looked at me like she wanted to say something about that, but she didn't. We found a stone bench near the edge of the courtyard and sat down, close but not touching, the space between us charged with all the things neither of us had said yet. "Can I ask you something?" she said, after a long quiet moment. "Sure." She turned to look at me, and in the low glow of the string lights, her expression was harder to read than I wanted it to be, part nerves, part something braver than nerves. "Did you ever love me?" she asked. "Back then, I mean. In high school." The question landed like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples through every memory I had of that year, every glance across the biology lab, every excuse I'd invented to walk past her locker, every night I'd lain awake rehearsing words I never said. I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because I'd never said it out loud before, not once, in 12 years, and saying it now felt like opening a door I wasn't sure I was ready to walk through. "Yeah," I finally said. "I think I did." She let out a breath, slow and shaky, like she'd been holding it for longer than just the last few seconds. "I used to wonder about that," she said. "For years, actually. I'd see you in the hallway and think, does he even notice me? And then I'd tell myself I was being ridiculous, that we were just friends, that I was imagining things." "You weren't imagining things," I said. "I was terrible at hiding it. I just thought I was being subtle." "You were not subtle," she said, laughing a little, though there was something fragile underneath the laugh. "You used to volunteer to be my lab partner every single week, even when the assignments got randomized." I noticed. I just didn't know what to do with it. "I didn't know what to do with it either," I admitted. "I had this whole plan to ask you to homecoming. I practiced it in the mirror. I had a joke ready and everything. What happened? You said yes to Marcus before I got the chance." Her face fell, just slightly, a flicker of old regret passing over it. "I said yes to him because I thought you weren't going to ask. I waited, you know. I kept waiting for you to say something, and when you didn't, I figured I'd been wrong about the whole thing. I was 17 and terrified," I said. "I had this whole narrative in my head where you'd say no and then every class we had together for the rest of the year would be unbearable. So I just didn't." "That's so sad," she said, but she was smiling now, a soft, rueful kind of smile. "Two idiots too scared to just say the thing." "Story of my life," I said. "I'm better at big decisions when there's less on the line. I've turned down job offers with less agonizing than I put into that homecoming decision." She laughed again, and this time it came easier, lighter, some of the tension draining out of the space between us. "I always wondered what would have happened," she said. "If you'd asked. If I'd said yes to you instead." "Me too," I said. "More than I probably should have, honestly. There were nights in college where I'd think about it out of nowhere. You'd cross my mind, and I'd wonder where you were, what you were doing, if you ever thought about that year the way I did." "I did," she said quietly. "More than I let myself admit." We sat there for a while without talking, listening to the muffled music drifting out from the reception hall, the occasional burst of laughter from somewhere inside. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was the kind of silence that comes when two people are both turning something important over in their minds and don't want to rush past it by filling the air with noise. "Can I tell you something else?" she said eventually. "Something I've never told anyone?" "Of course. After graduation, I almost didn't go to college where I ended up going. I got into two schools. One was closer to home, and one was farther away, in a different state entirely. Everyone thought I picked the farther one because of the architecture program, and that's true, that's part of it. But there was another part of it, too. A part one never said out loud. What was it? I thought if I stayed close, I'd keep running into you. And I wasn't sure I could handle that. Seeing you around, wondering, never knowing. It felt easier to just leave. Put some distance between us and let the whole thing fade. I felt something tighten in my chest, a mixture of tenderness and a strange kind of grief for the years that could have gone differently. Did it work? I asked. Did it fade? She looked at me for a long moment before answering. Not as much as I wanted it to. Something shifted in the air between us, the kind of shift that happens right before something important is said or done, and neither of us moved to close the gap first. We just sat there, caught in it, both aware that the conversation had crossed some invisible threshold and there was no walking it back now. I have to be honest with you about something too, I said. I dated other people over the years. A few relationships that lasted a while, one that almost went somewhere permanent. But there was always this thing in the back of my mind, this quiet comparison I never told anyone about. I'd meet someone new and some part of me would be measuring them against a memory of a girl in my biology class who I never even had the guts to ask to a dance. That's not fair to them, she said softly. Or to you. No, I agreed. It wasn't. But it was true, and I couldn't seem to shake it, no matter how hard I tried. So what happened? With the one that almost went somewhere permanent? She figured it out before I did, actually. Told me flat out one night that I was holding something back, some part of myself I wasn't giving her, and she was right. I didn't have a name for it at the time. I just knew she was right, and I didn't know what to do about it. We broke up not long after. Amicably, mostly. She's married now, actually. Has a kid. I saw the announcement on social media a while back and felt happy for her, genuinely happy, but also a strange kind of relief, like some part of me had been waiting for permission to stop pretending. Maya was quiet for a moment, studying my face like she was looking for something specific and trying to decide if she'd found it. I got engaged once, she said. Did I mention that? No, I said, feeling something drop in my stomach even though the story was clearly already over, clearly resolved. Clearly not a threat to whatever was happening between us right now. What happened? He was a good man. Kind, stable, everything you're supposed to want. But about 6 months before the wedding, I started having this recurring feeling, like I was walking into the wrong life. I couldn't explain it to him. I couldn't really explain it to myself. I just knew, deep down, that something essential was missing, and I was terrified that if I went through with it, I'd spend the rest of my life quietly aching for something I couldn't name. What did you do? I called it off. Broke his heart, and honestly, broke my own a little too, because he really was a good man and he didn't deserve what I put him through. But I couldn't marry someone while some part of me was still wondering about a road I never took. The words hung there between us, heavy with implication, and I felt my pulse pick up in a way that had nothing to do with the cool night air. Was I part of that road? I asked, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. She met my eyes, and there was no hesitation in her answer this time. You were the whole road, she said. Neither of us said anything for a long moment. The string lights swayed gently overhead, the faint music from inside drifting out into the courtyard, and I felt like the entire world had narrowed down to this one bench, this one conversation, this one impossible, terrifying, wonderful moment. I don't know what to do with that, I admitted finally. I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, I've spent 12 years turning you into this idea, this what if, and now you're sitting here telling me it wasn't just me. That you felt it too. That you're still feeling it. I don't know how to process that in real time. You don't have to process it in real time, she said, a small, understanding smile crossing her face. We're not 17 anymore. We don't have to figure everything out on one bench in one night. That's fair, I said. But I also don't want to let this go again. I did that once. I let the moment pass because I was scared, and I spent 12 years wondering. I don't think I can do that a second time and live with myself. So don't, she said simply. What are you scared of now? I thought about that question seriously, because it deserved a serious answer. I'm scared this is a wedding thing, I admitted. You know, the champagne, the string lights, the romance of running into an old crush after all these years. I'm scared that it feels enormous right now because everything about tonight is designed to feel enormous, and in a week, back in our regular lives, it'll feel like something that only made sense in this specific, magical, slightly unreal setting. She considered that for a moment, nodding slowly, like she respected the honesty of it rather than being offended by it. That's a fair worry, she said. I've thought about it too, actually, sitting here. But I keep coming back to the fact that I felt this pull toward you in ordinary, unglamorous moments too. Not just tonight. I felt it 3 years ago when I saw a photo of you at your cousin's graduation on Facebook and just stared at it for way too long. I felt it last year when someone at work mentioned they'd gone to a college in your city and I asked, completely unprompted, if they happened to know you. It's not just the lights and the champagne, for me. It's been there the whole time, showing up in unglamorous, embarrassing little ways. Okay, I said, something in my chest loosening at her honesty. That helps. That actually really helps. What do we do now? She asked. Practically, I mean. I live 2 hours from where you live. We have actual lives, actual jobs, actual complications. This isn't a movie where everything just resolves neatly because we said the right things on a bench. No, I agreed. It's not a movie. But 2 hours isn't 12 years, and it isn't a continent, and it isn't the kind of thing that has to end a story before it even starts. I don't need everything figured out tonight. I just don't want to walk away from this table without knowing there's going to be a tomorrow. A phone call. A weekend. Something. She reached over and took my hand, her fingers cool from the night air, threading through mine like it was the most natural thing in the world, like we'd done it 1,000 times before instead of never. Okay, she said. There's going to be a tomorrow. We sat there a while longer, not saying much, just letting the moment settle into something real instead of something fragile and temporary. Eventually the DJ inside announced the last dance of the night, and the muffled opening notes of a slow song drifted out into the courtyard. Dance with me, she said, standing and pulling me up by the hand she was still holding. For real this time. Not 12 years from now. Now. We didn't go back inside. We stayed right there in the courtyard, under the string lights, swaying slowly to a song we could barely hear, and it felt like the most honest thing either of us had done all night, more honest than the conversation, more honest than the confessions, more honest even than the question that had started it all. Can I ask you something now? I said, my chin resting near the top of her head, her hand warm in mine. Go ahead. Do you think, if I'd actually asked you to homecoming, we would have ended up together back then? Or do you think we needed all these years apart to become the people who could actually make this work? She was quiet for a moment, thinking it over seriously instead of rushing to an answer. I used to think the first thing, she said finally. That we lost something because you didn't ask, and I said yes to the wrong person, and that mistake cost us over a decade. But sitting here now, I think maybe it's the second thing. I think 17-year-old me needed to go build a whole life, make a few mistakes, learn what I actually wanted, before I could recognize this for what it is. I don't think either version is wrong, exactly. I just think this is the version we actually got, and I'd rather be grateful for it than mourn the other one. That's a healthier way to look at it than I've managed, honestly, I said. Give yourself time, she said, smiling up at me. You've had 12 years to build the sad version of this story in your head. You've had about 20 minutes to consider the happy one. I laughed, and something in my chest that had been clenched tight for longer than I even realized finally began to loosen. 20 minutes and a whole lot of courage on your part, I said. You're the one who actually asked the hard question tonight. I would have just made small talk about the venue and let another 12 years slip by. Somebody had to, she said. I got tired of wondering. I drove home the next morning with her number saved in my phone under a name that made me smile every time I saw it, and a plan already forming for a weekend 3 weeks out, when her work schedule finally had a gap wide enough for a visit. It wasn't simple, in the weeks and months that followed. 2 hours of distance turned out to be a real, logistical thing, not just a romantic inconvenience to be waved away with a slow dance and a good conversation. There were weekends that fell through because of work deadlines, a few awkward video calls where the conversation didn't flow as easily as it had that night in the courtyard, a handful of moments where the old fear crept back in and I wondered if we'd built something real or just something beautiful and temporary. But we kept choosing it. Every time the fear showed up, one of us would name it out loud instead of letting it fester in silence the way we had at 17, and naming it seemed to take away most of its power. We learned, slowly, how to be honest with each other in the unglamorous, ordinary moments, not just the ones lit by string lights and wedding magic, but the ones that happened over grocery runs and traffic jams and long Tuesday night phone calls about nothing in particular. 6 months after Jake's wedding, she got a job offer in my city. She told me about it hesitantly, almost apologetically, like she was worried I'd think she was moving too fast, chasing something that wasn't fully real yet. Take it, I told her, without a moment of hesitation. I've spent 12 years wondering what if. I'm done wondering. I want to know. She took the job. It wasn't a fairy tale. Moving is hard, blending two established lives is harder, and we had our share of arguments and adjustments in that first year of actually being together instead of just imagining what being together might feel like. But underneath all of it was something steady, something that felt less like the electric, uncertain spark of that night in the courtyard and more like the quiet, sturdy warmth of a fire that's been given time to properly catch. A year and a half after the wedding, I proposed to her in that same courtyard, under those same string lights, which Jake and Priya had cheerfully agreed to let us borrow for the evening, joking that they should start charging a fee for successful matchmaking. Maya said yes before I even finished the sentence, laughing through tears, telling me later that she'd known the moment she saw me walking toward that bench a year and a half earlier that she wasn't going to let this chance slip by twice. Sometimes, late at night, she'll ask me again, not because she doubts the answer anymore, but because she likes hearing it, likes the ritual of the question and the response, the way some couples have songs that are theirs. Did you ever love me? She'll ask, a small smile already tugging at her mouth because she knows exactly what I'm going to say. Yeah, I tell her, every time. I think I did. I think I still do. I think I always will. And every time, it feels less like answering an old question from a girl I used to know, and more like making a promise to the woman I finally, after everything, get to spend my life with.